Hey, this is a quick walkthrough of how the palette generator that I've created works. This is primarily for Tailwind CSS, but I'm sure there'd be utility outside of Tailwind as well. So quickly talk through why I built this. The way to create these color palettes actually found in this refactoring UI book. Ironically, this book speaks against using tools to generate color palettes. But that's primarily because a lot of design tools you'll see, like I've just found this random screenshot from Dribble here, you'll usually get a color palette that looks something like this. So this is just an approximation of 6 colors. It's not a slam at Dribble or anything, but it's 6 sort of primary colors that have come from this screenshot here. But if you look at the screenshot itself, there's more than 3 grays and there's more than 1 blue. And ideally, you're going to need a lot of dark and different lights and shade throughout a design like this. So you can't just use 6 colors like this. You actually need all of the light and shade in between. And so that's why Tailwind CSS out of the box comes with these like awesome color palettes. But these have all been hand created and hand tooled by the eye and hand of professional designers at Tailwind CSS, which do such an excellent job. The issue then is, though, that if you just stick to these color palettes, you'll end up creating Tailwind websites that'll look the same, unfortunately. So really, you do want to use your own custom palettes, but creating 10 color palettes like this can be pretty difficult. So the whole idea from this was to create a tool where if I just start with one base color, can I create 10 color values and then, like it speaks about in the refactoring UI book, tweak the hue or saturation at the extremes of the scale. And then also adjust the lightness minimum maximum to adjust the lightest color and the darkest color. So that's what this tool does. Once you open this up, you can click add and create a few different random color palettes if you like, if you're going to have multiples. But I'm just going to work on that initial blue one that we had there. So here's this blue color palette that we start with. You can change this to any valid hexadecimal color. Some of them work better than others, but you can see how this distribution of light and shade and hue and saturation updated there. So there's also a color picker here, so perhaps we actually want to go through and change this here. So let's get a nice teal color. And we can see that the 500 color is a bit above the medium line for lightness value here. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but we can start to tweak these values here. So when these come in useful, if our light color isn't as light as we'd like it to be, maybe we can actually increase the maximum lightness. There's a bit of trickery happening here in that this lightness maximum is actually referring to an imaginary 0 swatch. So 0 will be white at all times. We also always want like one swatch inside of that. And because since like late in Tailwind version 2, I think we got these 50 values, it's separated by half, where all the rest of these 100 values, if any of that makes sense. But we're essentially adjusting. If we keep adjusting this, we'll end up with the 50 value at white. So we see FFF and we can see 0 and 50 are now at the same amount, but we don't want to be all the way at white. Maybe we want to just have that just visible there at the end. And then likewise, we can adjust the minimum. And again, the same thing. This is controlling an imaginary 1000 swatch, but we can adjust that value either in to keep making our values lighter, so that our maximum value isn't black. But if we were to keep switching this down, eventually our darkest color would be black. So again, we can just adjust how dark we want the darkest value to be, how light we want the lightest value to be, and then everything will be adjusted linearly in between. There is also a mode to adjust by luminance, which is a bit different. You can see how the distribution of those values is slightly different, but you may prefer that. But essentially, you can still adjust your lightness, and we got luminance, minimum, maximum there as well to change those values. I'm going to switch back to lightness, and I'm going to bring those in a bit again. So when would we use the hue and saturation tweaks? The saturation tweak is particularly useful when we've got a base color that doesn't have a lot of saturation. So if I'm going to pull this back down to here, and we can make a pretty dull looking 500 color. So you can see how dull this is now, but it's especially dull here in the lightest values. And that's where jacking up the saturation will make a big difference. And we can do those incrementally, and we can see these values change on this graph here, which is just a visual thing. But if we jack that right up, you can see how now my base color is still that same desaturated color, but we've got some life here in the lighter colors, which can really improve the visuals overall, and it would put more saturation in those extremes as well. The hue is kind of less useful, but it's there just for the sake of it. If you wanted a really wacky color scheme, you could jack that right up, and you can see how it is changing the color value. So this would be like a real design choice. Not one that I can recommend, but perhaps like a slight tweak out at the edges can do some interesting things there. So we've got our new color palette here. If we wanted to see that in progress, or we've got a demo here where there's just this very basic hero panel, I suppose, from a website here where we can see what this would look like in light mode. It's using those color values there. I can even switch that to dark mode to see how it works if I've got darker versions of those same colors. And we're able to keep changing this color as well, so we can see how that might change. Another way to preview how this works, and really especially to see how you would put this into your Tailwind config. Actually, we need to change the color of that because that is no longer blue. Let's call that emerald, I guess. Sounds like a color. We can hit the copy button here, and we need to put that in our Tailwind config. Now, I don't have a project set up ready to go, but we can use tailwind.new to open up a playground. And I can see that throughout this demo here, they use the color sky quite a bit with the blues here. So I can go here and I can just paste that straight into extend. There's our colors. Now, no one's using emerald at the moment, but if I change my color to sky so I don't have to update the HTML, you can see how now I've got those emerald colors that we had from our palette there, and we could start playing with that in a playground there. So that's kind of the basics. I've written a full blog post on how this all works. I hope you find it useful. I'm going to continue, hopefully, ideally, to add new features to this. If there's a feature that you'd like to see, let me know. But I hope you find that useful. Let me know.